Welcome to the Shudder. I thought I'd do some Canada encounters. I've got a viewer submission from Jason. Big thanks to him for sending that in. It's a very well written account. You'll hear that one last, but I found two others from Ontario that I think you're going to find very interesting. I certainly did. So without any further ado, dust off that glider rocker the kids gave you for Christmas and settle in. What I saw when I was 14 years old is still hard to believe to this day. It was around the first week of September. I headed out to do some bird hunting like I had done years before with my grandfather. On this day, he figured that I was old enough and wise enough to do this on my own now. So I went to the same old skidder trails that I have hunted since I can remember. I went out at approximately 7 a.m. with my .410 shotgun and my little mixed dog, which was very aggressive and had run-ins with bears, moose, deer, and everything else that lives throughout the bush in northern Ontario. I had been hunting for about an hour or two with no results. Very odd for these trails, which had always carried a large population of grouse. I tried 3 or 4 different trails when my dog began to act very nervous and skittish. I knew something was near, most likely a bear, since I was starting to smell what I can only describe as a wet dog mixed with garbage. It was more intense the further up I walked on the trail. Within seconds, my mean little hunting dog, which had chased off anything that we had come across before because she was so protective of me, suddenly took off like a greyhound in a race. She ran back down the trail when I had just started to call her name, Tina. I heard the tall grass about 3 feet high in those grown-over trails begin to shuffle when what I will say was a huge, man-like creature, which was at least twice as big and tall as any bear, stood up, glanced at me for a second, then calmly crossed into the other side of the trail in what I think was maybe 2 or 3 steps. I was 6 feet tall at the time, and would have taken me half a dozen or so steps to cover that kind of ground, with old logs and rocks hidden under that grass. It made almost no noise as it did so. The most outstanding features on this creature was the size of its upper body, but mostly the dark, almost grayish black eyes, large brow ridges, and big brownish red lips. Yes, I was that close and scared to death. Too scared to think about running or using the shotgun that was in my hands. I think I stood there for a minute or so, frozen in fear. The thing that may have snapped me out of this was, where's my dog, my best friend that had taken off so quickly? On my very fast way back down the trail, I heard large branches being broken as if it was running from me as fast as I was running from it. I asked myself hundreds of times what the heck that could have been. Now I am certain it was a Bigfoot. With its reddish-black hair or fur, and walking upright with human features, there was no way it could have been anything else, period. I have kept this secret for a long time, not even telling my grandparents when I got back to the cabin. I was so stressed about this that I didn't hunt for 2 years after that, and I've never gone back to those trails since. This incident happened during a job in northeastern Ontario, close to the Quebec border. Sometime in the middle of September, on a beautiful warm sunny day, my partner and I were working growth and yield plots, obtaining information to determine the health of the forest. I know the closest town to the incident was about 65 kilometers away, Matheson, Ontario. Our plot was located about 700 meters north from the road where we had parked the truck. I remember the walk into the plot being annoyingly brushy for the first 100 meters or so, a lot of red osier, dogwood, and tag alder, making it a chore to carry our tools to the work site. At the true location of the plot, the trees were mature and the sun beamed in and down. After we had completed measuring trees within the plot, we started aging test trees. Suddenly, we heard what sounded like an old rotten log being ripped apart just meters from where we were working. We both stood up and gave a little attention to the noise, hoping to determine if we were too close to a bear. Through my own evaluation of the noise, I decided to walk back to my vest and grab a can of bear spray and a soil auger. As I returned to my partner, I asked if the bear was persistent in rummaging the log. My partner's reply was that it seemed to circle around us back toward the vehicle. Again, we heard noise. This time, the movement of shaly rock, like heavy paws crushing the shale. Neither of us could get a visual of the bear and decided it was cautiously avoiding us. We continued working the plot. About 10 minutes later, my partner finished drilling the soil with the auger and had laid down the soil sample to take notes when a huge, wet, boomerang-shaped chunk of rotten tree root was thrown into the canopy above us. It crashed past branches, arched over toward us, and landed just to the left of where I was standing. My partner stood up quickly and looked around. Startled by the incident, he said, "Of all the years in the bush, that was weird." I asked him if there were other crews in the area. We had the only paperwork that could possibly compass anyone to our location. So I just yelled, "Ryan, Steve, whatever, guys." But who could possibly throw a wet, rotten chunk of wood weighing about 50 pounds or better that far, that high? Suddenly, another, smaller stick flew the same path as the root, again landing close by us. That's it. I decided I'm walking toward the direction of the flying objects were coming from. I still had no visual of anything as I started losing sight of my partner, and then bang. I'm standing, absolutely still, thinking to myself, who would place an 8-foot-tall haystack here in the middle of nowhere? It was a precarious-looking haystack. Then I realized it's not a haystack at all. I told myself, that's a Sasquatch. The creature stood with its back to me. Its head was down and acted as though it was trying to conceal itself and stood motionless. It was at least 8 feet tall and had to weigh 600 pounds. It was broad-shouldered and square. Its hair was long and flowing. It was a light brown, yellowish color, hence me thinking it was a haystack. I remember thinking to look away before I scare it or it moves. My heart and breathing lost rhythm, and shock prevented me from moving normally. I caught my breath painfully enough so I could walk back to my partner. Decisions and memory felt distorted, and everything raced through my mind as I continued toward my partner. I asked myself over and over, did that just happen? When I arrived back to the work site, my partner asked, "So what was it?" I replied, "Nothing. Let's finish up quick and get the heck out of here." I never told poor Luke, who continues to work out there, what I saw that day, or that I was treated for anxiety as a result when we returned home. Back in 2000, just as spring was turning into summer, I traveled to a lake in central Ontario, just outside of a place called Parry Sound. A long, shallow lake, but tranquil and only dotted with a few cottages that were well aged. I was familiar with the place as my aunt and uncle had a log cabin that my uncle's father built. I was alone at the time and had a boat with me to do some fishing. The pike fishing was fantastic, and the water was clean enough you could scoop a cup up from the lake and drink it. Yeah, I don't know about that, Jason. I traveled up the lake to the north end, as it is quiet and the deeper water sometimes offers pickerel fish. My intention was to stay up overnight and set up a small camp on the north shore, as I had done before. Trolling up the lake, I had an odd sense that I was being watched or followed, yet the area was void of humans. I could best describe it as having a heightened sense of awareness of my surroundings, something I've never had to deal with before. It wasn't until I finished trolling up the lake to the North Corridor landing where my thoughts came true. As soon as I landed the boat and stepped ashore, I heard a large splash in the water to my right. At first, I thought it was a beaver slapping its tail, But when I saw exactly what was happening, being focused on the area, another slap or splash occurred when a large rock came from the top ridge and landed about 50 feet away from the boat. This could have been a small rock slide given the sheer height and composure of the area, but it came out too far. I realized there was something else doing this. That's when I yelled and said, "Hey, I'm armed," and this was no small rock. I scanned the area with a set of binoculars, but could see nothing. I proceeded to set up camp, feeling uneasy, but I said to myself that I could always sleep in the boat and zoom away quickly if necessary. After setting up camp, I went back out for another troll until the sun started to set, at which point I turned around and trolled back to camp. Dinner was quick, and walking to the edge of the lake to wash my dishes is when it got very spooky. The most blood-curdling scream echoed around the lake, very guttural. I just froze for a moment to hear it again a second time, but now it seemed louder. Maybe it was moving toward me, but the area I was in is like a channel, so echoes can play tricks on you. Because of this, I went immediately to the boat to use the large spotlight and scan the area. This is finally where I believe I caught a glimpse of what caused the sound and more than likely the rock throwing. Large, dark, and fast. I might have stunned it for a moment because before it started moving, it just stood staring at me. I reached for my binoculars, and as I moved, it started tearing away along the ridge and behind it to the point where I could no longer see it. I can tell you it was huge, and had a way of movement and agility unlike any human. I would need 5 times the pace at a minimum to move like it did, and I certainly would stumble. In fact, it was hard to keep the spotlight trained on it. Shortly afterwards, I heard the scream again, and it was long and drawn out. The tone was lower, almost as if it was angry. With the speed of this thing, I didn't feel I would have a chance to defend myself should it come into camp. So I took my sleeping bag, blanket, and pillow out of the tent, extinguished the fire, and drove the boat into the small bay. I dropped anchor and slept. Well, I tried to sleep for the night. 2 more cries were made within a half hour, then all went silent. At this point, even with the echoes, I began to get a better understanding of how the sound travels and a better idea of the approximate area it was coming from. The power line corridor, which I firmly believe is used as an easier way to commute beside the lake. There is a trail used by crews with ATVs or 4-wheel drives for line maintenance when necessary. It's also clear-cut to prevent trees touching the lines. It may also give a sense of bearing and location to these creatures, also permitting them to make a rapid escape when necessary, however potentially to the risk of them being spotted, but in this area there is nothing. All the cottages are toward the south. It wasn't until a few weeks later I came back to the area armed with a trail camera, making the effort to dock the boat in an unfortunately most inconvenient location to get up to the top of the ridge. As I struggled to the top, I found what I felt to be a good location to mount the camera. After doing so, I scanned the area with my binoculars but didn't see anything. I stayed up there for a bit, then went back down to the boat and started trolling back up the lake. Nothing but a moose was captured. Unusual, they are normally closer to the water. There were also 2 frames with what appeared to be nothing, yet the camera was triggered. Since then, I have visited other locations, hoping to come across the same experience, but armed with a little more knowledge and gear. I have joined forces with other individuals in the past, but nothing has come out of our ventures, with the exception of one such time, north of the lake. We set up camp and left a recorder going when we left. I called it the breather, and it was the sound of something entering our camp with labored deep breathing, walking right by the recorder that was hooked up to the shelter, and then walking away. To this day, I do not know what it was, but it's highly unusual. Jason sent me a copy of this recording, and I'm going to loop it for you several times here. Very cool. Thank you, Jason, for sending that in, and I appreciate you taking the time to get out there and try and get some answers for the rest of us. That is truly appreciated. I hope you enjoyed those Ontario accounts. I'll be doing a live show here in a few days. Nothing major, just saying thank you for hanging in here with me and taking some notes and suggestions from you. What I consider the base of the channel is you guys, 75 or 80 of you that comment every time, make requests or offer tips and advice, or send in your accounts. I really appreciate that. Okay, that's it. Please consider hitting that like button, and if you subscribe, make sure you hit that notification bell so you can join me here next time for the Shudder.